welcome, Chris, to We Do the Work, globally renowned working class podcast. Maybe we could start a little bit. You could introduce yourself and a bit about what you do.
Yeah, I'm Chris Parsons. I'm president of the Minnesota Professional Firefighters, and I'm also a fire captain with the city of St. Paul at Station 22 on the north end, just off of Marion and Front Street. I've been with St. Paul Fire Department for it'll be 20 years in October, and I've been in union leadership for the last 15 years. I was 8 years as the secretary, one of the principal officers for St. Paul Firefighters Local 21. In the last 6+ years, I've been president of the Minnesota Professional Firefighters. And we represent 1,800 men and women, mainly career firefighters. About 90% of our folks are career firefighters. About the remaining 10% are single role paramedics and emergency dispatchers. With our firefighters, a lot of those folks are dual role firefighter, paramedics, and firefighter EMT.
Well, from a registered nurse there at United Hospital ER, thank you for everything you guys are doing. I think that you're probably in the same position that we are in to some extent, that things are changing very rapidly. And I imagine you're concerned for, all of the folks that you represent there in the union. What I get a lot is from the public is the first thing they want to know is, how are you guys holding up? How are you doing? What kind of challenges are you facing, like as of today?
We're frustrated. So, I'm not a business agent. I work on the front lines, just like you. And, I take the calls and deal with the patients. I don't have as much direct patient contact because of the company I'm on. But we do go and we respond to these calls, and there's a ton of frustration. In the station, it's COVID-19 from, the minute that we get there, and at shift change, we're getting all the updates, and it's the last thing that we talk about before we turn in for the night, and hopefully we sleep all night, but that very rarely happens. So it's a big deal, and we work in close proximity with each other. So not only are we going into people's homes, but we're working in close proximity. There's 24 people at my station spread out over 3 24-hour shifts. We live there. There's no such thing as social distancing for us. And with our jobs, there's no such thing as social distancing for us or our families and nurses and hospital workers included, because we're dealing with sick people. We are inevitably bringing this home to our families. It's probably about 100% that we're going to get sick, and we're going to bring it home to our families. And we've seen the data that you're not necessarily symptomatic when you're still infectious. So it's a big concern. It's a great concern, and I'm also concerned at the lack of preparation. We've been hearing about this illness for months. And the fact that it wasn't until 2.5 weeks ago that anybody really started to take this seriously is a joke. And it's a failure of our federal government to protect us. They say, you want a circus, hire a clown. Well, we have some real clowns that we've hired, and now we've got the circus, and it's people like you and me and our members that are dealing with this failure.
My mom actually does a bunch of corporate research, and she's found one study after the next that warned of this scenario from as early as 2003. And that, everything from, corporate studies to Department of Defense, to governmental studies from the, I think, Office of Budget, Management and Budget. And, what she's producing, I can't get over how accurate it predicted this moment. And we're talking about 15 years ago. And then here you are speaking about people taking this seriously as recently as 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And, March 12th, I wrote a letter to legislative leaders. I got to work, and some of my coworkers weren't really taking this issue seriously, and I had been reading up on it, and I'd seen it coming, and I saw this wave kind of coming at the shore, and nobody seemed to be taking it seriously at any level. And I got into it with a coworker over morning coffee at shift change, and I had to walk out of the kitchen, and my hand with my coffee cup was shaking, and I went right to my room, and I just fired off the letter that I sent to legislative leaders, and for the last it's 3 weeks now. It's been nonstop, just trying to get the minimum level of protection for our people. We're not asking to be this legislation that we're working on. Legislation is not going to keep our people safe. There's no such thing as safe in our business, but we can keep us maybe a little safer, maybe have a little backstop. And it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer, but it's a case study on the problem of money making decisions in a crisis, and how people can really be harmed and let down and killed.
So let's get to that, because the first time I saw you speak or was fully aware of this was when steps of the Capitol. And tell us a little bit about this legislation, how you first encountered it, and kind of the process that started at that point and ended up with you on a podium expressing some deep and sincere disappointment.
Yeah, so this language that we're working on would create a presumption in the workers' compensation statute, presumption similar to what frontline medical workers have now for PTSD, and what firefighters have for cancer. It would create a presumption to where if Cliff Willmeng, if you contract COVID-19, it is presumed, because you are a nurse in the ER, that you will have acquired it from the job. So the burden of proof now switches to the employer to prove that you that you did not contract the illness from the job. Where before, without presumption, it's up to the employee to have to prove which patient gave them COVID-19. And that is not something that's realistic for us. And, we're working people, we're fighting to pay our bills. We don't have lawyers on staff like our employers do, and I know in my employer, it's routine that if even on presumptive illnesses, the first step is the denial step. And our folks have to hire work comp attorneys. There's work comp attorneys making some pretty good money in this town because of the employers that deny coverage for workers. And so this makes it more fair. It's not an entirely fair system. The work comp system sucks, but this makes it a more fair system for our folks to have to navigate if they walk into it under the presumption that their illness occurred on the job.
Yeah, so it would seem an absolute minute offering from a state as large as Minnesota, with obviously a budget surplus of $1 billion, to help the frontline first responders, to at least alleviate some small financial worry that they have to take into the job every time they show up. And, for one, like, how did it play out? What was the process that you experienced behind it?
Yeah, so I'm a lobbyist. That's one of the things that I do in my part time. But this job that I do is advocating and lobbying.
Do you have like a suit, and do you like carry a briefcase full of money or anything like that?
I've invested a lot of money in suits. I don't have a briefcase full of money. We're not the teachers or the nurses. We're only 1,800 members, but we have our job, right? Or the nobility of our professions, and we also have the fact that, hey, you know what? A lot of politicians want to say we're supported by the firefighters. You know, it's kind of like kittens and puppies and firefighters, and so you know. So we do have a lot of doors open to us. We have our basket of issues, economic security, health and wellness, and as long as you're with us on those, then we will find ways to be with you regardless of your party. So this legislation, right after I fired off my letter, a lobbyist that I work with drew up some language. And the leadership in the House, DFL, they were on board. Majority Leader Winkler signed on to it as a co-author right away, and then Representative Dan Wolgamott, another DFLer from St. Cloud, he signed on as the chief author. And then our Senate author, so this bill's totally bipartisan. Our Senate author is Senator Jeff Howe, who's from Rockville, just outside of St. Cloud. And Jeff was a former St. Cloud firefighter. He was a member of the International Association of Firefighters. So, and he's worked with us on some other bills. So we had a totally bipartisan bill. And to me, you know, it seemed like a slam dunk. You know, I mean, how do we not protect our people that are on the front lines? You know, when we're asking everybody to not even go outside, we're not even going to protect the people that are outside the fence, you know, fighting the battle for us. So it seemed like a no-brainer. Everything that happens at this level at the legislature kind of goes through the meat grinder, you know, and then they make the sausage at the end of the day, and then they vote on it. Well, at the last minute, our legislation was not included in the bill that they voted on. And so that, you know, for lack of a better term, that really pissed me off. And we kind of saw this was coming. So we planned this rally for Thursday. They were going to vote. And, I had some things that I needed to get off my chest. You know, I came right from work, you know. I already didn't have a great night's sleep. But also, you know, when I walked out of the station, I'm leaving the men and women that I'm there to speak on behalf. And so, you know, you saw my frustration. It's my frustration, it's my words, but it's their frustration too. And you know, this is a big issue for us. And you know, I knew that the public were behind us, and all we had to do was make the case. We have a simple argument: give us presumption on this, just like on every other issue that we have presumption on. It's a simple argument, and it's an argument that can't be refuted. And the only refuting this is the fact that big business is worried that, well, hey, other people may want this too, or maybe, you know, if we give this to you, then down the road, you know, you'll want, you know, X, Y, and Z. I've been fighting the Chamber of Commerce from the minute I started working on the Capitol 6-7 years ago. Every issue is that we're constantly fighting the Chamber of Commerce and their deep pockets.
And so do you think, I mean, the Chamber of Commerce, for people that, you know, aren't very familiar with the lobbying process, and, you know, most of us working people, I mean, we're not wandering the halls of the Capitol and making, you know, office visits and that sort of thing. How did you experience like the Chamber of Commerce, like intervening in this? And like, were there any other groups or corporate umbrella organizations that, you know, you think may have had a part in this?
Well, the insurance lobby, the Chamber of Commerce, cities and counties to a certain extent, the hospitals, you know, they're all in bed together. You know, they all hang out at the same country clubs, and you know, not right. To get populist on this, but it really does come down to money. You know, we walk in the office door and explain our case, and then they, you know, they've got some of these folks on speed dial, right? The Chamber of Commerce, and usually, we'll have a deal on. I've had it happen where, hey, we've got a deal on Friday, and we expect to be working on that same deal on Monday, but over the weekend, somebody's made a phone call.
Wow.
Somebody has called and spoken up, and Jesse Ventura used to say, "Follow the money," and follow the money. It's that simple. It's just follow the money. And this is the problem with the politics in this country. It's too much about money and not about people. And this is exactly why we're the richest country in the world, and we're having to beg for PPE and N95 masks. This is a travesty. It's an embarrassment. I'm tired of being embarrassed. We really need some changes, because now we're the ones that are paying the price.
Well, we're paying the price, and the moment we can't show up for our job, it's probably a safe assumption that the Chamber of Commerce isn't going to come down and tote your sick family member into the ER.
No, they won't. And I'm sure they have many rooms in their house that you don't have to leave their house, and if they live on they have a fairway in their backyard, they can probably just step right out. But we don't have that, right? I mean, we're just we're people that are living paycheck to paycheck, and it's a totally separate world. We have to go out and get our own groceries. We don't have people that go and do that for us. So we're living in a totally different reality, and I think that reality has blinded some decision makers, that they're not living in the real world.
Yeah, well, the longer we go through this crisis that, I personally believe was anticipated for decades, the more it seems to be that the decision makers at the corporate end or the executive class, the more alienated and lost and sometimes outright incompetent they start to reveal themselves to be, where the real frontline workers, I mean, we aren't even part of the central decision-making apparatus. And numerous times we've asked for that. We've said, like, look, if you want a real view of what's taking place in real time, nurses and doctors and techs need to be in the central decision-making bodies. And that has been absolutely forbidden from the minute this started. So, it starts to create this very deep division and distrust, because the decisions we're carrying out and the orders we're carrying out are being written by people we don't even know. And that starts to become a very scary process. And I don't know, at one point, it starts to feel like you have to make decisions for yourself and, protect yourself and your family. And, usually it's right around that time that you start getting pulled into HR and that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's what got me in union work and seeing the power of unions. I grew up in a union family. My mom was a union cleaner, and my dad was a union laborer. And they were rank and file members. They weren't rabble rousers like we are. But you know what? We didn't have big family vacations or whatever. But I had food on the table, a roof over my head, and we had healthcare growing up. And and so I've been a big believer in movement and worker power my entire life, and that's one of the things that kind of drives me, and that's why we need strong unions and why workers need a strong voice. And the biggest travesty in this country has been the decline in union membership, and all these union collective bargaining laws that are being passed around the country. And we need a tide to turn, and I hope that this is it. Maybe people now see, like, hey man, this is what drives this country, is people going to work and having a paycheck. And there's all kinds of things that go along with economic security, and that's happiness and fulfillment. And if people aren't getting that, watch out.
Yeah. Well, it starts to feel like uh, how much pain can we really take? How much loss, and, because you start to get the impression that the people at the top really have no limitations in terms of what they're going to take. And, us walking around in this crisis, and you see, I'm walking through my neighborhood and everybody's thanking me for my service. And I say, well, what do you do? And they say, oh, I'm a pediatrician, or I'm a nurse, or I work at the grocery store. And it's like, these are the only important people in the world right now.
Yeah.
And I think that, it starts to feel like maybe we've lost a sense of that importance and that central role in the world. And I think, if nothing else, I hope to God we leave this with a much deeper understanding of who these working people are. Yeah.
Sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, unfortunately, it often takes a crisis for people to kind of put their priorities in the right place. This is a crisis like, none other, we've witnessed in our lifetimes. I think that this is one of those, watershed moments where people are going to, we're going to be changed when we come out of this. Definitely.
So we're right about 21 minutes here, Chris. We usually try to wrap this up 25, 30 minutes or something like that. But, just from my rank and file to yours, is there anything that we need, or is there, anything that you want to tell the public? How can folks help you guys out?
Yeah, well, number one, I want to thank the public for their support. We really felt it. We had an online petition that somebody put up. It wasn't even us putting it up, and it's got 20,000 signatures.
Nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. The video that we posted, we did a Facebook Live video on our NPFF page. It's got, I checked it last night. It was at 18,000 views. I've done videos like that before. Maybe get a few hundred, in your hand.
Right.
But 18,000 views. I mean, that's amazing. So first of all, I want to thank the public, but also I want people to know that that we all need to be involved in the political process, and being involved doesn't have to be wearing a suit and having a briefcase full of money and taking it down to the Capitol. It's a phone call. It's a phone call. It's an email. The problem is that people, we are so apathetic in this country where we're not taking ownership of our government, and people need to contact their legislators. Just pick up the phone, leave a voicemail. If they come in Monday morning and there's 10 people left a voicemail on one issue, I mean, that raises a lot of red flags, because I walk around the Capitol and I don't see a lot of constituents. I see a lot of lobbyists in suits walking around. Go down to the Capitol, visit your legislator. You own that office. They don't own that office. They're just residing there. They're there they don't have to agree with you, but they have to listen to you. Go in and talk to them. And it's that simple. Citizens need to take ownership and take part in their government. And, it's important. It's that somebody said a few years ago, it was actually Tom Perez, our former Department of Labor secretary. He said, if you are not at the table, that you are on the menu. So we need to make sure that we are at the table.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day, Chris. I know if you're like everybody else, you've got 17 things you're trying to stretch yourself to attend to. Any shout outs for any of your folks at the station or anything like that?
Yeah, Station 22, the double deuce, getting it done. Yeah, C shift. Yeah. But just I think about the guys that are out there working every day, and the guys and gals, and it's not easy. We're away from our families, and we're dealing with crisis. It's front of mind, and I want everybody to know that, and I know you know that too, because of the work that you're in, which is very similar. So it's just we just got to keep fighting. We'll get through this, and you know what, I'm doing the best I can for folks down at the Capitol, and they can contact me, send me an email, reach out on Facebook, like you did. we're there, and we want to build coalitions. We want to build partners because we're seeing what this coalition, we got their attention. Let's keep going.
And if somebody wants to contact you, how do they do that, Chris?
They can contact me. My email is cparsons, just like my name, cparsons at mpff, like Minnesota Professional Firefighters.org. Or if you want to make it simple, cjp74 at msn.com.
Okay, well, thanks for the interview, Chris. And, I hope we can get something real passed through this legislature sooner than later, because we've obviously got plenty of stuff on our plate right now. And please feel free to use We Do the Work. I said before the interview, we're not really Ted Turner, but we want to be there and be a platform for regular working people and get these issues front and center as fast as possible.
All right. Well, Cliff, it was great talking to you. And next time I'm bringing a patient down to United, I'll look for you.
Hit me up, man.
All right.
All right. Have a good day, Chris.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.